You think betrayal at work is loud, obvious, and easy to spot. But the truth is, the people who damage your career the most are the ones who smile while doing it. You've been there before. There's someone at work who feels safe. Not your best friend, not someone you fully trust, but decent enough, helpful enough. They remember small details about your life. They check in on you. They ask how you're handling things. And one day you open up just a little. You say you're overwhelmed. You admit you're struggling with workload. You vent just enough to feel human. Nothing dramatic, just honesty. Weeks later, something strange happens. Your manager brings up your difficulty managing workload in a meeting you weren't even invited to. The wording is clean, professional, almost rehearsed. And somehow, it traces back to that same person. No confrontation, no argument, no obvious betrayal. Just your own words, repackaged, used. And that's when something inside you shifts. Because deep down you realize something uncomfortable. You weren't talking to a colleague. You were talking to someone collecting data. Most people walk into the workplace believing one simple idea. If you're a good person, things will work out. If you're honest, people will respect you. If you work hard, you'll be rewarded. But that belief collapses the moment reality shows up. Because the workplace doesn't reward goodness. It rewards perception. It rewards control. It rewards people who can shape how others see things without ever being seen doing it. And if you don't understand that, you become easy to manage. Not because you're weak, but because you're predictable. The truth is, the most dangerous people at work are not loud, aggressive, or toxic in obvious ways. They are calm, polite, helpful. They don't create conflict because conflict creates evidence. And evidence is the one thing they avoid at all costs. Instead, they operate quietly, strategically, consistently, and once you start paying attention, you'll notice they all follow patterns. 3 patterns specifically. The first is the one most people fall for, the one that feels like kindness, the collector. This person helps you before you ask, supports you publicly, gives you credit in meetings, brings you into conversations. At first, it feels refreshing. Finally, someone who isn't selfish. But what you don't see is the invisible ledger. Every favor is a deposit. Every act of kindness is recorded. And one day, the withdrawal comes. Not directly, not aggressively, but subtly. A moment where they need your support in a meeting. A situation where staying silent benefits them. A decision where your name backing theirs makes the difference. And you comply, not because you want to, but because it feels wrong not to. Because somewhere inside you, you feel like you owe them. That's not kindness, that's leverage. The second pattern is even more dangerous because it doesn't rely on relationships at all. The narrator. This person doesn't do the most work. They don't lead the hardest projects. They don't take visible risks. Instead, they control the story. They show up after things happen. They write the recap emails. They summarize meetings. They explain situations to leadership. And here's the part most people don't realize. The person who explains what happened often gets more credit than the person who actually did the work. Because leaders don't experience your effort. They experience the version of reality that gets presented to them. And if someone else is controlling that version, they are controlling your value. You build, they describe, and over time, their description becomes the truth. The third pattern is the most subtle, the chameleon. This person changes, depending on who's watching. With leadership, they're sharp, engaged, proactive. With peers, they're passive, dismissive, sometimes even slightly cold. And the shift is so smooth, you almost question yourself. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they're introverted. Maybe you're overthinking it, but you're not. What you're seeing is calculated effort allocation. They invest energy where it benefits them and withdraw it where it doesn't. And once you recognize that, you realize something uncomfortable. You now know exactly where you stand. You think consistency is a personality trait, reality. For some people, it's a strategy they turn on and off. If this hits, comment 1 below. Because once you see these patterns, you can't unsee them. And that's where things get deeper. Because the real reason you don't notice these people early isn't because they're smarter than you. It's because your brain is working against you. When you decide someone is good, your mind protects that belief. You ignore small inconsistencies. You justify strange behavior. You fill in gaps with positive assumptions. Not because you're naive, but because your brain prefers consistency over truth. Then there's something even more dangerous. Silence. You notice something feels off, but no one else says anything. So you assume it must just be you, and everyone else is doing the exact same thing, doubting themselves, staying quiet, watching, until the pattern becomes normal. And by the time someone speaks up, it's already too late. Because now, the narrative has been established. And if you challenge it, you don't get agreement. You get resistance. Suddenly you're difficult. You're misunderstanding things. You're creating tension. The focus shifts, not to what happened, but to you. And now, you're defending yourself instead of exposing the truth. That's the trap. And here's the part no one wants to admit. The system allows this, not because companies are evil, but because perception is easier to measure than reality. Real contribution is complex, hard to quantify, difficult to track. But perception, that's easy. Who speaks well in meetings? Who appears calm under pressure? Who presents clean summaries? That's what gets rewarded. So the system naturally favors people who manage how things look over how things actually are. And once someone understands that, they stop playing the game you think you're playing. They start playing a different one, a quieter one, a more effective one. And if you stay unaware, you become part of their strategy, not intentionally, but functionally, because your effort becomes their leverage. Your honesty becomes their information. Your silence becomes their cover. And over time, something begins to change in you. You speak less. You trust less. You question more. Not loudly, not dramatically, just internally. And that's exactly where they want you. Not fired, not destroyed, just diminished. Because a quiet person is easier to outmaneuver than a confident one. A doubtful person is easier to control than a certain one. And a person who starts second-guessing themselves stops being a threat. That's the real cost. Not losing a promotion, not losing credit, but losing clarity, losing trust in your own perception. Because once that's gone, everything becomes harder. Decisions, conversations, confidence. You start playing defense in a game you didn't even know existed. So what do? You don't become paranoid. You don't isolate yourself. And you definitely don't try to outplay them using the same tactics, because that's not your strength. Instead, you shift your awareness. You stop assuming intent based on tone. You start observing patterns instead of moments. You pay attention to consistency, not words. You don't overshare early. You don't reveal pressure points casually. And most importantly, you separate friendliness from trust, because they are not the same thing, not even close. You learn to document your work, to speak clearly about your contributions, to control your own narrative before someone else does. You stay calm, but you stop being open by default. And slowly, things change. Not externally, but internally. You become harder to read, harder to influence, harder to reposition. And that alone shifts the dynamic. Because these people don't target strength, they target access. And when access disappears, so does their advantage. At the end of the day, the workplace isn't fair, but it is predictable. And once you understand how it really works, you stop being surprised, you stop being reactive, and you start moving with intention. Because the goal isn't to win against them. The goal is to stop being someone they can quietly use. If this changed how you see your workplace, consider subscribing. Because once you learn to see clearly, you stop being the easiest person in the room to play